Hello, everyone. We've got top of the hour, 11 a.m., at least Central Time, depending on where you're at. I am going to give just a minute here, maybe 30 seconds or so. I still see, plenty of people coming on board, getting audio connections, all that good stuff. So I'll wait just a half minute or so, let everybody get connected in and everything settled, and then we'll get started. All right, I think I see, looks like pretty settled in on the attendees and connections, so we'll get started. So first off, hello everyone, welcome. My name is Johnny Brister. I'm the Protect Practice Principal here at Alchemy Tech Group. I'll be hosting our webinar today. We're gonna discuss a few things here. So we're gonna talk about how these three different solutions can help protect your people, your privilege, and your data. So I'm joined today by my three co-hosts. I've got Michael Smith from Okta, I've got Chris Hills from BeyondTrust, and Stephen Freedom from Varonis. So let's see, first things first, let's cover the agenda real quick. So we'll start our journey today with a high level of Okta's identity and access management capabilities. I like to start there because I think it's important to establish that identity platform. It really becomes that foundation for your people, and the rest of their access along the way. So once that identity platform is established, and then we'll kind of start to understand what those accounts are and what the access they have, as well as, other areas of elevated or even privileged access. So that's where Chris will come in, and he's going to help us understand how to address those areas, with the BeyondTrust platform. And after we do that, which we have a good understanding there, so Stephen's going to come in and he's going to take us through some key concepts around protecting that data that all of your people have access to, and that's going to be whether it's data that's on-prem, such as on-prem file server, or maybe it's in a cloud application such as Office 365. So additionally, we're going to look at some user behavioral patterns, and that will arm you with the right information so you can enhance your overall security posture based on that real-time data. So that's kind of the agenda and how we'll step through things, the way that we'll sort of lay out the story. A few housekeeping items, see if I cover all these, make sure that I hit all the high notes here. So first things first, today's webinar is definitely eligible for CPE credits. So everyone's going to receive a certificate of attendance so that you can self-report those for all of your various certifications. It should have all the data that you need, time, date stamp, a summary of what we covered, and the applicable domains. So we try to make that easy for you. Next, right there in the middle of the screen, so everyone is going to get an entry into our access granted Jeep sweepstakes. So some of you might know with Alchemy, we teamed up with Okta to give away a Jeep Gladiator Rubicon. It's a real giveaway. It's not just a marketing ploy. One person's actually going to win, and it'll be announced next year during Okta's Octane 21. It's their annual technical conference. So for those of you that already have an entry into the sweepstakes, you'll receive a second entry and you'll double your chances of winning. So no action is required for you on your end. If for those that haven't attended one of our previous Jeep demos, you will get an entry by completing this webinar. So it does qualify you, but we will send out a link for you and you just fill out a brief form online so we can get you officially entered. I think our marketing director is going to drop that in the chat box as well. So we'll get that to you multiple ways to make sure you get your entry there. I think at the end of that form, if you're filling that out, you can select the option of I already attended a Jeep qualifying event. Of course, if you want to also attend the original demo, we're certainly happy to get you scheduled for that as well. And then prizes. So we've got a couple live raffles, right? So during the webinar today, we're going to be drawing names for a total of 6 prizes. So we've got 3 of those Yeti Tundra 35 ice chests, 35 quart ice chests, as well as 3 remote radio controlled Jeeps. And they also come with full accessory kits. I think those kits include a repair tool set. I think it has an extra battery, an interchangeable motor, and I think it's a clear pre-cut body set. So stay tuned throughout the presentations, as we may not wait till the end. We may have some drawings in the middle there. So winners must be present, so don't leave until we get all those prizes, all this content knocked out. And let's see, one last thing, Q&A. So just a reminder, we will have a dedicated Q&A time slot, but feel free to drop in a question along the way. Use that Q&A box in the RingCentral control panel. You can do that anytime during the presentation, and we'll make sure, if we can't answer them in line during the presentation, then we'll make sure that we get them addressed at the end there. So with that, let me give you a quick introduction to Alchemy. So Alchemy is a word, defined as the process of taking something ordinary, turning it into something extraordinary. That's kind of the Alchemy slogan, right? And we do that a few ways, right? So we only look to hire that top talent, whether it's technical or account management. We obviously want to build extraordinary trust-based relationships with our customers. I think that's probably the single most important thing that we look to do. The business is really all about trust and make sure we're delivering the right technology and the right solutions for our customers. We have a portfolio of technologies and services that, we do a good bit of things, but we don't do everything. And we're actually proud of that, right? So we try to zero in on what we're really good at and make sure that what we're delivering to our customers is the right technology and service. And that's where we try to master. And then obviously we do all that to try to create, a business outcome for our customers. So a little bit about, how we go about doing that and how we view that Alchemy perspective. So you can see here, coverage map, some stats about Alchemy at large, where we have representation. But I think the real thing I want to draw the attention to is the Alchemy perspective, right? So that team is made up of industry leaders, whether they come from a partner, a vendor, or like myself, I come from the customer side. So we put together our team very intentionally that way with the idea that we've got a well-rounded view of what our customers need, and then we're always delivering, that right outcome that you're looking for. And so we're very proud of that fact. And the way that we do that is we look across all those different areas that are of concern, whether it's identities and devices, the apps, the content networks, even your operations, right? We really look to turn all those individual items that may be considered siloed into a real solution. So we do that, and we do that through what we call our 3 practices you see there. So we've got our experience practice, our protect practice, and our transform practice. Today we're going to be kind of zeroing in on the protect practice. And you'll see here, here's sort of those 3 pillars that we look for, to help our customers with. And today we're actually going to cover all 3 of these spaces, whether it's workspace security, data protection, or identity management. So the solutions we have for you today really help to draw out a well-rounded story, how you can protect, enhance your security posture, whether it's from the endpoint all the way to the identity or from the cloud all the way to on-prem data. So we're really trying to cover that whole perspective there today. All right, so with that, I'm going to bring in Michael Smith from Okta. So Michael, if you don't mind, if you would take a second, just give us an introduction, tell us about what you do at Okta, what your role is, and then we'll let you get started on filling us in on some identity-specific information.
Cool, thanks, Johnny. Yeah, so my name is Michael Smith. I am an Alliances pre-sales engineer. I work with our partners to enable them and to bring up the technical knowledge base at our partner level, but I also get to do all these wonderful webinars with our customers and get to meet you guys as well. Been with Okta for about a year now, so moving forward.
Great.
So why is Okta relevant? So we all know more than anybody probably out there that the world's changing when it comes to IT. You're no longer supporting those on-premise applications. There's a big push to either move to cloud for cost reasons, or it's the only available option for you on the software you want to use. And then you're having to support multiple types of devices, right? So you're no longer just supporting that desktop behind a firewall. You're actually supporting devices that are mobile, maybe either managed by you or not even managed by you. And those devices may not even be your employees' devices. They may be devices for your partners or your customers or something like that, outside of your control completely, and the user base is outside of your control. But you still have to support a lot of those legacy applications. So Okta invented what we call the Okta Identity Cloud, and that's made up of our services there at the bottom. I'll start bottom top, but our services are single sign-on that gives you that seamless access to your applications through our dashboards and through our APIs and SDKs. And then our universal directory that gives you a single point of management and a reference for all of your identity information on your users. And we're adding our adaptive multi-factor authentication for that second layer of security. And then our lifecycle management, being able to control and manage the rights and the access control of those users throughout their role changes from creation all the way to separation from the company. And we do that through two product lines. Our workforce identity, which is really out there for, it's a single pane of glass for your users to access their applications. And we also have that backend API and SDK piece for you to start integrating and adding on your partners or your other business requirements like logistics or shipping or some other companies you may integrate with. And also bring that to your customers. So moving into that customer identity, giving that same single sign-on experience, self-service experience, self-registration experience to the customer identity. And of course, all that's great, but it doesn't really do you much good if you have to do a lot of special integration with everything you want to integrate. So Okta's built what we call the Okta Integration Network. And this integration network is over 6,500 applications that we've pre-built connections to. And some of those may be, provisioning, some of those for that lifecycle management, some of those may be for just, access to those applications. We also have some integrations that are deeper that go into SAML authentication or using just basic web-based authentication. We also integrate with our federations out there. So whether it be OIDC or Microsoft ADFS. And really Okta addresses all your use cases for identities. So those customers, your B2C, your workforce, your B2E, your partners, that B2B or business to business. And whether it's your applications, your infrastructures, or your APIs, and even on-premise, Okta's added on-premise application access, as well as infrastructure access to those on-premise infrastructure for your SSH and RDP access to your servers. Go ahead, John. I mentioned that 6,500 integrations. This is what's going to really give you that time to value with Okta. The biggest differentiator with Okta and our competitors is this Okta integration network and our ability to give you a capability of deploying an application in minutes, clicks away. We have several wizards built that walk you through how to deploy these applications. And you can actually deploy applications in under an hour to your entire workforce or to your customers through just a few clicks guided through a wizard. And this is just kind of an example. I've been in the industry for quite a while now, probably about 25 years now I've been in IT, and 20 years I've been in the identity industry. And these are some projects that we've done in the past, just to show you just a timeline. When I say time to value, what I'm talking about. A project like MGM, 65,000 users, where we're adding in single sign-on and multi-factor. That's a typical 18-month type project with some of your traditional identity management solutions. With Okta, we were able to provide that in 3 weeks. And yeah, I won't read through each of these, but you can see that through all these different examples, how even the most complex installations and deployments can be done within weeks instead of months or years. And I know you've probably heard a lot about Okta's products in the past, so I wanted to talk about Okta security since we are talking about security today. And this is our security on the back end. We build a unique cell architecture. It is based on AWS, but we don't use all of AWS services. And we'll talk about our uptimes in just a second. But the architecture is built to be very resilient. We're made for failures. We have workloads that can fail. We spin up new workloads. It's all automated. We have self-healing nodes that see if they're not performing correctly. They bring themselves down, bring another one up, transfer all the workload without any interruption of service or degradation of service. And we have our security features on the back end that we have a constant monitoring 24/7 of our back end security of a very modern security technology team. We also have those third-party audits. We meet a lot of our certifications that you're already going to need to meet in your industries or your verticals, and we can help you meet those with your identity solution.
Michael, quick question there. I just want to talk about, so that headline under high resiliency, and then obviously with, you talked a little bit about, different industry regulations that are needed. So I've got that unique cell architecture that I see there. And a common question that I get when talking with customers is around the different types of cells. And I know you guys offer some very specific, HIPAA type cells or FedRAMP. Can you just talk a second about that? Just all the different ones that are available so that customers understand no matter what their, line of business is, or just so they have a good understanding of the additional controls that can be put in place to meet the needs of their business.
Oh, absolutely. So with Okta, we have cells they're located across multiple data centers across the world. So we have a global data center footprint, and our cells can, each cell has a redundancy built between those data centers, as well as we have a full disaster recovery cell that we can bring up the cell physically if we need to as well. And that, again, that spans across the globe. We have multiple data centers. But the cells themselves we have our standard cell, which is meets all your normal compliances, but we've gone in further and added a couple cells for those extended securities. You mentioned HIPAA, but also FedRAMP. So we actually have cells dedicated which go further into those security notifications that you need, the reporting that you need for those certifications, and the ability to control access and report who has access to that information or that data. And then also the ability to report on breaches and things like that within that cell itself that meet those compliances.
Yeah, perfect. I always like to bring that out because, you know, every industry and every customer's got various regulations that they need to follow. So just want to make sure that everyone's aware of the additional controls and compliance controls that are in place with the various offerings there. So thanks for adding that in.
And not only can we meet your compliances, we can do geolocation compliances. So some of those cells, we can have your cell dedicated to that certain data center that's in the region you need it in, to say, for instance, in the US, or maybe if it's in Europe or in Australia, Asia, things like that. So we talked about our security a little bit. We do an elastic storage. So all of our storage is built on elastic storage. And in that storage, we do that multi-layer encryption in which we're doing multiple tiers of encryption. And each one of those key servers and those keys that are encrypting your data is actually stored in separate databases and segmented out. So each tenant has its own set of keys, has its own set of security, has its own set of encryption separate from any other tenant, so nobody's able to cross information. And at Okta, we actually enforce zero trust controls or least privilege access model. So even our internal employees don't have access to your tenant. I tell a lot of my partners and customers, when you create a tenant, be careful not to lose the email of the user that is the admin, or create a second admin, because even at Okta, we have to jump through a lot of hoops to recreate a tenant to be able to give you that admin password. We don't have that access to your data that you have. So we're very secure, we're very segmented, we're giving you the isolated information to your tenant. And then we do that strong credential hashing. The credential hashing that we're using there meets some of the highest standards and complexities of hashing. A lot of our competitors don't go as far as we go for hashing. And a lot of that's because of our infrastructure and our cell architecture. We're able to dedicate a lot of CPU and memory towards that a lot of customers, our competitors, would have to build on-premise, and they're not able to give that solution to you. And then all of our software developers, everything, and our maintenances are all done in the cloud. We keep one version of Okta throughout all our cells. And so when you are looking at your version of Okta, you don't have to worry about, well, have you updated to the latest version, things of that nature. And all of those updates are handled for you by Okta without any outages or interruption to service.
Very cool. Perfect. So thanks, Michael. And I know we're gonna circle back around towards the end and talk a little bit more in depth about some multi-factor authentication. But as the story goes, I'd like to now shift over to universal privilege management with Chris Hills. So Chris, if you don't mind, could you give us a brief introduction of who you are and what you do there at BeyondTrust?
Sure. Thanks, Johnny. Chris Hills, Deputy CTO at BeyondTrust. Johnny, like you said, I also came from the client side. Prior to this endeavor, I was actually the technical director at Charles Schwab, for those of you that might know the securities and financial institution. Led the charge there in PAM security, overall strategy, across the platform, if you will, for about 9 years. And came here, fell in love with the company after working with BeyondTrust for 2.5 of them, and here I am now. So yeah, that's kind of my story, the short and sweet version of it.
Good deal. So I'll let you go ahead and get started with the presentation, but I'm excited to hear about all different aspects of what you guys call universal privilege management.
Exactly. So without, stealing my thunder there, but to kind of give you an idea of how we came up with this universal privilege management, you truly have to understand the background of the companies. And so if you were to look at what BeyondTrust was, let's say 2 or 3 years ago versus what we are now, ideally, this is what we are. So in 2018, a private equity firm essentially targeted the best in breed products across what we refer to, similar to Okta, we refer to as the 3 pillars of PAM. And so ideally in that space, this private equity firm essentially targeted a BOMGAR for their, privileged remote access solution, Lieberman Software, their privileged identity solution, the Effecto Defend Point, which was essentially their endpoint privilege management for reducing those admin rights. And then the last piece was, the core BeyondTrust. And BeyondTrust as a foundation for privileged access management obviously had their own products, Password Safe, PowerBroker for Unix, Linux, PowerBroker for Windows. So there were some overlapping pieces, but ideally what they did was brought 4 companies together in the course of 1 year to essentially figure out what the best in breed truly was with some of those overlappings and actually come up with a go-to-market strategy. So behind the scenes of what BeyondTrust is, know that there is some very robust best in breed products related specific to PAM that compromise and that have come from, essentially 4 companies that are now what are known as our BeyondTrust 2.0. So as we move into that, obviously, the tradition of, hey, we've dealt with some of our customers, what's happening, what's going on. Our mission hasn't changed. We still need to approach the way we always have. And the idea behind this is ultimately we want to revolutionize the way we, secure and the way people manage privilege access. Go ahead, Johnny. And ideally, as everybody can imagine, right, the challenge, if you think about privilege access management, is, trying to manage this explosion of privilege access across your enterprise. And there's no difference when we think about now, with a lot of this COVID and what things and what companies are having to do and the technologies that they're having to bring in or expand to accommodate for, maybe it's telecommute, maybe it's additional infrastructure. Technology is continuing to grow. And with that, obviously we talk about, this trying to shrink the window of exposure, but the attack surface continues to widen. And whether you look at what was, 20 years ago, on-prem to where we are now with DevOps, cloud, and a couple of years ago, within the last year, the explosion of the Internet of Things, ideally, this is where, again, technology continues to grow and we have to continue to grow with it. And this attack surface is essentially growing as technology grows. And ideally, when you think about, what we're trying to do, it's hard. And ideally, the reason why is because, these privileges, when you think about them, are growing rapidly with technology, including, not only your traditional administrators, but now you're talking about external vendors, you're talking about help desk staff, you're also talking about non-human accounts, such as applications or service accounts. And so this, again, as technology grows, all of these pieces grow. And so, of course, what does that mean? Well, the threat actors know this, and they essentially continue to take advantage of the lack of control that we're basically instituting to manage these, right? And so if you think about it, still today, all of the breaches that occur involve some sort of privileged credential. Nearly 90% of those essentially are, critical Microsoft vulnerabilities and could be mitigated just by removing excessive admin rights. So that brings us to what we talked about or what we mentioned at the beginning, universal privilege management. What does universal privilege management mean? Well, essentially the universal privilege management approach allows you to secure, and manage privileges across every user, every session, and every asset. This includes privileges across all types of environments, including cloud environments where it's becoming increasingly difficult to manage privilege sprawl. It also includes securing privileges across all types of application, users, endpoints, devices, everything that you can think of that essentially has a heartbeat on your network could potentially or does potentially have some type of identity associated with it. And therefore, trying to make sure that we integrate, we protect, and we make it harder for cybersecurity criminals to, basically shorten or make that attack surface smaller is what our angle is and what our goal is.
Yeah, so Chris,
Yep.
just to interject the question here. It's an interesting slide. I like the layers that it kind of projects out, from the environment itself all the way out. One that I get asked about very frequently is on the user side, but more specifically in the service account side, right? That seems to be a very unmanaged space for a lot of customers. Fairly easy to go create an Active Directory or even a local account becomes a quote unquote service account. And then at the end of the day, there's very little, if any, accountability for that. So I guess the question is just to drill into that point with BeyondTrust. I know you've got a discovery tool that will help people to identify those, but if you could just maybe double click into that space and talk about what you see with customers and more specifically, how BeyondTrust is helping to eliminate this problem or manage the problem, I guess is a good way to say it.
Absolutely. No, that's actually a great question, Johnny. And kind of like what you mentioned, yes, we do have Retina, which is a discoverability tool that was used. It's actually our former tool for vulnerabilities. But ideally what happens, and I stress this a lot when we do larger webinars and, we spend a lot of time talking and actually diving into what you'll see here soon as the 3 primary pillars of PAM. But the focus kind of to what you said, service accounts, I think those get overlooked probably the largest. And when we look at the bigger scale of, let's say, the anatomy of an attack or attack vectors as they relate to excessive admin rights or just admin rights in general, we don't always have to have excessive, but what does a service account actually mean? Well, a service account is just like any other privileged account. Might not be thought of as the same, but when you have somebody who's an admin who has an admin ID or a named admin ID that they typically use to only log into servers to do administrative privileges on, that's a privileged account. Just like a service account is granted a certain amount of administrative rights. Typically they're used, whether it's an application account, whether it's used for a process or running services or maybe a scheduled task, that account has rights within Active Directory, right? And so typically what we see is a lot of, these breaches that are occurring. And what are the cybersecurity criminals going after? They're going after service accounts. They're going after app-to-app integration where there's a clear text password that, once again, is probably some sort of a service account that's stored in that application or stored in a clear text file. And they're leveraging that. And through the anatomy of an attack, essentially what they do is they continue to elevate privileges, probe, and laterally move with that account till they ultimately find what it is they're trying to accomplish. Create havoc, dropping malware along the way, creating maybe new accounts, maybe deleting other accounts, changing passwords. And ideally, what we don't think about is we don't think about securing those service accounts on the servers as much as we do trying to protect the end user on their desktop, laptop, or workstation by removing excessive admin rights away from them. And the cybersecurity criminals, they know this. So what are some of the first things they target? They go probing for service accounts. If service accounts have access, unrestricted access on a server because we're not restricting what applications a service account can do or what access a service account has to specific applications. There's a lot of different things that are involved. So we focus on that piece in our EPM suite, which is our endpoint privilege management, that pillar there. And it ties in the Unix Linux with the Power Broker, product, as well as our, what used to be the Avecto Defend Point product. But that covers everything from from Windows to Mac to Windows desktops, if you will. And so ideally, we tend to focus on the end user, and we don't spend enough time focusing on helping secure the servers. So
Yeah.
I hope that answers your question.
No, it does. It does. I think just my little tidbit to share here is that I think the one that got me the most from a customer environment was the account that my DBAs picked to run SQL. So anything that was running SQL Server, it was out there and had definitely elevated privileges, elevated access to data. So it was always a pain point for us. But anyway, nonetheless, I just wanted to kind of double click into that because I know it's a key pain point for many of our
Absolutely.
customers.
And so ideally, when customers come to us, we talk about the journey, right? And we talk about what's the path to this universal privilege management. And I always try to tell, everybody who's looking at whether it's us as a PAM, provider giving a solution or purchasing a solution or anybody else, the journey never stops. You need to continue evolving, maturing, and moving forward with your PAM environment. Whether you start, let's say DevOps is a really big place for you now, or Sec DevOps. Continue to mature that. Move to the remote access. Institute that piece of it, move to the least privilege on desktop, then the servers. Ideally, this continues to evolve. And when we talk about the UPM model, our model essentially allows you to embark on the journey, no matter what the use case is or what your starting point is. But our approach allows you to essentially start with the use cases that are most critical to your organization and that can, easily expand your solution to implement this comprehensive maturity over time for your PAM. So obviously, if you want to start protecting the privilege access from third parties or removing desktops, you can do so without having to, let's say, implement all of the PAM, right? You can take it in pieces. And so that brings us essentially to our last slide. And this, the beauty of this slide, this is our company on a slide. And ideally, when we talk about the three primary pillars of PAM, the first pillar of PAM is the privileged password management. I don't get hung up on the word password. This is privileged password in session. So we do everything from managing passwords, SSH keys, making connections to servers, and whether it's a SSH console or whether it's an RDP console or whether it's an application console in a browser, which is emulated like a terminal. Ideally, all of these encompass that, managing those passwords, whatever those passwords may be, network devices, servers, applications. And then we move over into the endpoint privilege management. And this is what we kind of spent, some time talking about, removing those excessive admin rights, allowing or approving what can be executed on desktops or servers. And then the last piece is the secure remote access piece. This one kind of embraces, an additional use case from the privileged password management pillar, but ideally we focus on third party and vendor access. How do we give, vendors and third party people access to our environment, do it securely, be able to record what they do, and make it a point-to-point connection so we're not giving them blanket access with a VPN. So that's our privileged remote access solution. And then we have the help desk solution, which allows those help desk folks to actually, make that connection to that end user, which is really important right now because what's happening is you have help desk folks that are working from home, trying to help now this, massive eruption of people also having to telecommute and work from home because we can't go into the office. And so having a solution that provides a secure means to communicate with those users, whether it's their iOS device, their Android device, using their camera to help them figure something out, or, just the typical help desk, support ticket where, they need to get a printer connected for that matter. But ideally, what we've done is we've brought all of these pieces together. This is the universal privilege management. It's backed by our Beyond Insight platform, which is a single pane of glass, should you choose to want that. And the beauty of it is the architecture can be deployed in an on-prem, in a cloud, or in a hybrid of the two. And with some of the newer things that we have coming out, the Endpoint privilege management is offered in a SaaS. We're working on the privilege password management as a SaaS offering. And so, we're listening to the community and everything that's going on. And we're, we spend, I forget what the exact number is, but we spend a significant amount into R&D and listening to our customers and what they want. And so we continue to evolve, we continue to move forward. And, that's us, on a silver platter is this slide, and this all gets brought together with, everything from analytics and reporting to, clarity, which will give you the behavior analytics based upon the data that's getting put in. And that's basically it. Thanks for having me, Johnny.
Yeah, and of course. Yeah, I like the point there that I think sometimes, from a help desk perspective, making a secure connection to not enable, potentially malicious malware to then travel east-west, right? I think it's always one of the early steps in whenever, if you're battling or troubleshooting a potential security incident, first thing we want to do is remote out to the machine, right? And I always train my staff to ask, is that the first thing I should do? Or am I about to enable this malware to continue its east-west spread, So real good. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate all of that. It's definitely a good story. So next up is Stephen from Varonis. But Stephen, before I let you go, we are actually going to take a second, make sure that everyone is with us. We're going to have a quick raffle break. So we're actually going to do a drawing right now. We're going to do one, I believe we're going to do one for the radio controlled Jeep and one for the cooler. So I think we have 2 winners we're going to announce now. So Annie, I'll ask Annie if she's there, if she could pull the winners. And let's see, our first winner is George DeBeck. So George DeBeck, congratulations. You have won the radio controlled Jeep. And let's see, Annie, our second winner is Daywan Pack. So congratulations to both of you. Hopefully that you guys are on. Just wanted to have a quick wake up break to make sure everybody was still with us and tracking on where we are. So congratulations to those guys. So we'll have 4 more towards the end of the presentation. All right, so moving along. So Stephen, welcome to the call. I want to first just have a second for you to, if you could give us an introduction to you and what your role there is at Varonis.
For sure. Well, I hope none of the winners left just because they got what they wanted, so now they leave for the rest of the presentation. So my name's Stephen Fretham. I'm, as you can see on the screen, I'm the Director of Enablement for Varonis. I like to describe myself as a recovering virtualholic. So I got my start also on the customer side, designing Citrix environments. I live in up in north in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I spent some time at US Bank, United Health Group, Target, the companies that, you pretty much can't get away with not working for when you live in Minnesota. But I've been with Varonis now for almost 5 years. And basically my job is, telling both our internal employees as well as partners, customers. I do a lot of these events about the Varonis platform and how that works. So that's me in a nutshell.
Well, perfect. If you don't mind, take us through a little bit of the journey and how Varonis fits into our overall story today, and can obviously, more importantly, how can it help protect customers?
Absolutely. So Varonis, we like to describe it as a data security platform. And when I'm talking about data, what I mean is I'm talking about the files, the Word documents, the spreadsheets, the emails, the type of information that companies typically have the most of, yet know the least about. And it's often the type of data as well. I mean, particularly if you look at some of the examples of ransomware attacks or breaches like the Panama Papers, things like that, it's data that can be really critical for the function of the business. And if it stops flowing, the business stops working. So what I'm talking about here in terms of platforms is, Windows, NAS type file shares, of course, Office 365, seen a big movement to that, particularly over the last couple of months. Due to this shift to how we're all living and functioning in this pandemic, as well as, Linux, Unix-based file systems and SharePoint Exchange. We also support some of the outlying infrastructure with this as well. And I'll talk about how this all fits in a little bit. So Microsoft Teams has obviously seen a big explosion. It's being used quite a bit more. And we also like to look at Active Directory, both Azure and on-prem, and VPN traffic, DNS, and web traffic. So let's go ahead and go to the next one. And we use this to try to answer questions that a lot of organizations have difficulty answering, like, is my data at risk? Am I able to find where sensitive data exists, like GDPR information, credit card numbers? Is it exposed? How do I fix this without interrupting the business? Another big question is, am I able to detect a breach? Big one we've seen recently is all these workers have moved remote. Do I know what they're doing? What are they doing with data? How are they accessing it? What are they doing with it afterwards? And am I able to detect more sophisticated types of threats like APTs and insiders? And can I investigate and respond quickly? And the last one, and this one is probably familiar to just about everybody on this call, is am I able to meet compliance? So be it something like HIPAA regulation or PCI to the GDPR regulations, CCPA privacy regulations. Do I know where this data is? Do I know what people are doing with it? Can I prove compliance? Can I prove that I've reached a least permissive model? And can I keep data private and respond to things like data subject access requests and this new data privacy regulation? So all of these are the types of questions that we try to answer for our customers. And we do this with the Varonis data security platform. And so what we're doing is we're collecting information from all those data stores and infrastructure that I was talking about before, and we're doing content classification, looking inside the files, figuring out where that sensitive data exists. I then do a complete mapping of all users and groups from Active Directory, and I understand who has access to it. We then collect access activity, every single file touch, every time somebody opens, edits, deletes a file, and we start understanding what's normal and who should and should not have access to that data. We also add information from the bottom two pieces, AD telemetry and perimeter telemetry, that allows us to see what devices are accessing that data, what accounts are accessing that data, and if they're coming from the outside world, say from a VPN or through Office 365, how they're coming in, where they're coming in from, what devices they're coming in from. And then by monitoring DNS and web traffic, understanding how they're interacting with the internet. Are they uploading data to the internet? Are they exfiltrating it using more sophisticated techniques like DNS tunneling? This allows us to hit these three use cases on the right by, with data protection, understanding who has access to data, analyzing and figuring out who should have access to data, and automatically fixing it to do it very easily without interruption of the business. Ability to meet privacy and compliance by reaching a least permissive model, being able to quickly respond if there is a data breach to know exactly what happened. And that also flows right into threat detection and response. I know what all normal activities for that user, so I can report on abnormalities. Go ahead and keep going, that's fine. So when I talk about classification, the Varonis system is not just going out, and go ahead and click next, it's not just going out and looking for a 9-digit number or a 16-digit number and calling it a credit card. Instead, we do more advanced positive, negative keywords. We have some analysis that goes into this that will look for a 9-digit number with or without spaces. You can keep going, with or without dashes. But next to that number, we're going to have to see certain keywords. I'm going to have to see social security within 10 words of that 9-digit number in order to list it as a social security number. For credit card numbers, similar type of thing. We look for the 16-digit number, but we also have to have it pass the one algorithm that validates it's a legitimate credit card number. We also need to see terms like CRN or American Express within a certain proximity of that 16-digit number to validate it's a credit card number. And last one is, some of the data privacy regulations. As an example, just because there's a social security number does not necessarily mean that that is subject to CCPA regulation. So we need to see a California address, again, within reasonable proximity of that social security number to identify that as CCPA. So highly accurate, very fast classification. And then we put all this information together and provide you with insights and a dashboard to see exactly where your data is exposed. On the top left here, you can see we have sensitive folders that are open to anyone in the organization. So this allows us to quickly narrow down on a subset of our data that is currently exposed, and we give us a path to be able to clean that up. We also see the same visibility across Office 365 and say SharePoint Online and OneDrive. We also look at directory services. And this is something actually where we tie in very closely to what BeyondTrust is doing. We help automatically identify where these privileged accounts exist and where some of these exposures are in Active Directory that they just love to take advantage of when they get in. So this is something where we complement with them very well on that. Let's go ahead and keep rolling. So a little bit about what we do with this information that we collect. So I often get asked, well, how do you compare to something like a SIM, in terms of what you're doing? Similar to a SIM, we do collect billions of events from these different data sources, such as the data access events, looking at VPN and Office 365, Active Directory authentication, DNS, our web connections. But they're not just, we do more than just the raw events. If we go ahead and go to the next one, they're actually clean events. If you ever go look at, say, a file access or a VPN login in a raw log, you're seeing a single login could be 10, 20, 30, 40 lines of logs. A file open event could actually be way more than that. So we actually make those as a singular event, and then we combine and enrich them with the other data streams that we see. So you can see here, this account, David Johnson, we understand it's an account, but what we've also done is through behavior analytics, identified him as an executive account. And we do the same thing with admin accounts and service accounts. And this plays right into your privileged access management strategy and multi-factor strategy. You have to know where these accounts are to be able to secure them properly. We also know the file name, but we know that that information is sensitive through our classification ability. We pull the device IP address from it, but we also do a resolution process to understand the device name. Devices change their IPs about as often as socks, so we want to make sure we track the behavior to the device name, not just the IP address, and we do the same thing for external IP address and geolocation. Then what we do with this is we start to build what I like to refer to as a peacetime profile. I know exactly what David's normal behavior is, what he does in terms of Active Directory, where he's logging in from, what Office 365 resources he accesses, and what data he accesses. And then if we see deviation from that, we can actually alert, and the severity of the alert can be based on how much it's deviating from the behavior. So as an example here, we say David logged in, but he actually logged into a workstation or a device that belongs to another user. He logged in from an atypical location. Normally he logs in from Minnesota, but for some reason he connected now from the Ukraine. He's behaving differently than his peers, and he's accessing data that he doesn't normally access. Even though he has access to this data, it's actually stuff that he doesn't normally touch, and so that makes it, that raises a red flag. And this allows us to provide very actionable, very high fidelity alerts, if we roll on to the next one, that puts all this information into a single pane of glass about the account, the machine that they're accessing, the data that they're accessing, the time frame, and the severity of the alert based on the amount of deviation from that behavior. One of the things we do with all these events as well is we put them into a flattened backend database, so it's very, very responsive and allows you to quickly pivot and see more information about what's going on. If you want to see where users are connecting into your environment, you can click one click and see where every country that's connecting. Or if you want to see any sensitive data that was accessed over the last day or by what account, this allows us to very quickly, when you get an alert, say, okay, what did they do? What did they touch? Did they get anything out of my environment?
Sorry, Stephen, I was going to come off mute. I had a question for you on when you talked about what a user normally does, like what's normal. You said the reference that you had was that user has access to the data. It's okay, but it's not normal for them to do that. Is that something that's a proprietary formula with Varonis, or is that something that customers can, those type of behavior analytics, is that something that's tunable to meet the specifics of a customer environment?
That's a really great question. So our behavior analytics algorithms those are proprietary. However, all the events and alerts or the events that we alert on, or the behaviors that we alert on, those are very, very configurable. As an example, you can see a finance department that accesses financial data only once a year to do maybe year-end taxes, and that's something that could stick out in our system. Well, you can tune that to ignore that behavior.
Got it. Okay, perfect.
So, and just to sum up here, one of the things that Varonis is also well known for, and that a lot of our customers do with us, is we start with a risk assessment. And this is something that we do complimentary for our prospects. And that is, we identify, help tell you, hey, where is your sensitive data stored? Most organizations don't, they don't know what they don't know. They don't necessarily understand exactly where all their sensitive data is. So we'll go out and map that environment for you. We'll show you where your sensitive data is, and we'll tell you where it might be exposed. We also map those Active Directory vulnerabilities as well and start identifying what's going on in your environment. And as part of that service, we have our free incident response team. And this is both for our prospects as well as our customers that will help you come in. And if you get alerts or if you see unusual behavior, they help you get to the bottom with what happened. And that includes not just inside Varonis, but other systems as well. We do a full mapping of Office 365 to show you where you have data. And if you have team sprawl, if you started to use Teams a lot lately, we find that users are typically, or companies, pretty unaware of the data that's in the background. And so we'll help show you where that is. And during that time, we'll also do monitoring of VPN, DNS, and web traffic, as well as Active Directory. And if we do see anything during these assessments, we of course help you get to the bottom of it and figure out what's going on and see how you need to respond.
Perfect. Well, Stephen, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking us through that. I think
Absolutely.
I think for our next step, we're actually going to circle back around to Michael from Okta. So very quickly, I want to sort of wrap up the full protection story, add on all the layers there. So all the things that we've talked about, whether it's privileged access to the endpoint, to the data, or data in the cloud, how do we add that next level of protection and protect it with MFA? So Michael, if you're still on, hopefully you're there. Can you take us through that MFA portion to add maximum protection there?
Absolutely. Thanks, Johnny. Still here. We talked about Okta being able to manage the identity and the life cycle of the user and all the tools that Okta has available for the workforce and customer identity. But really, the biggest part of Okta when it comes to security is that multi-factor piece. And the reason that's relevant is because a lot of our data breaches today are no longer those exploits or code problems, or even some of the ones you see in the news, where people are using ransomware, things like that. The majority of your data breaches are actually through credential theft or poor credentials to begin with. And today's attackers are really changing the way they're attacking. If you think about in the past, a lot of attackers would hack a firewall, then hack a server or hack another system, and then start going east-west from that system. And it was pretty easy to monitor and see this activity. And we started developing a lot of modern tools and security tools that with AI that see that and shut that down. But when you have somebody's credentials and you log in as that individual, that activity is really hard to see as malicious activity. It seems like normal activity because it's a single user with the correct credentials logging in and doing the things they do on a daily basis. So in your organization, what we've seen everybody start moving towards is that multi-factor authentication. And there's several different layers or tiers to that multi-factor authentication. We see a lot of people using, not just usernames and passwords, but adding maybe a security question at that bottom level to get just a little bit more information about the user or verify who the user is. And then you can move in further, go into the SMS and...
Oops, sorry.
That's all right. No automation on this one, no animation. Moving to SMS or that voicemail call, or even that one-time password where we're sending it to you through a software solution. And then you can move forward and do things like the UV keys or those tokens that they carry, those physical tokens that are constantly changing. Okta Verify is our proprietary Okta-owned solution that it works on the cell phone. It's an application you download. It gives you a timed-based algorithm to keep a key in sync with the server's key. Really cool solution, works online, offline. And then if you want to go into those U2F tokens, even biometrics, today a lot of people are using Windows Hello, a lot of people are using facial recognition on Macintosh, or even biometrics like fingerprints, things like that. So, your multi-factor solution, it needs to be very versatile because your users today aren't coming to a desk, sitting down at the same computer and doing the same thing over and over again. They're working in different locations. They're working on different devices. And your users aren't always your employees or people you control. So you really need to start bringing context into the conversation of the authentication. And you really need to start looking at, first of all, the basics, passwords, but then moving into where's this coming from? Is this coming through a proxy on the outside on an internet proxy? Is the device they're authenticating with a device I trust? Is the device meet my compliance levels? What is that device coming in as? And then, where on the network are they coming from? Is this an IP range that I know is malicious or is known to have, bad actors coming from that IP range? And always looking for those attacks or those common brute force attacks or those common denial of service attacks coming in from the internet. And then also anomaly. We also email people and let them know what's happening with their account so they can say, hey, that wasn't me. I didn't log in. And they can say that's not normal. So with Okta's adaptive multi-factor, what we've done is we've really broken it down into these 3 sections, right? So user behavior, make a analysis of where the user's coming from, where they typically look at their past history, how they usually act. And then validate that device. Is that device something we trust? Is that device something we have control over? Is that device coming in? Is it a risk? And as we increase those risk levels according to that user behavior and that device behavior or context, we then make a decision as to which set of factors we want to require. And I really like this last little graphic here on multi-factor, because a multi-factor is something that like a login or a password. It's something that you have, like those physical tokens and keys or your cell phone or some other application you're getting. Or it's something you are, and it's that biometric, your facial recognition, retina scan, whatever, or even possibly, a key card or something you carry for that something you have. With all those combined, you can make a decision on the context as to what combination of factors you need, even as far down as passwordless. I don't need any multi-factor because I know they're coming from a device that's on our network that's trusted, and this is where they normally log in from. So their username and password is sufficient. Or I recognize that you're coming from a personal device on a network outside of our network. I'm going to not just ask for username and password. I'm going to throw in, something like a badge swipe, or maybe even a YubiKey, or a one-time password, or some kind of software token authentication. Or if I feel like this is a really secure, high-risk access from this context, I want to add biometrics. I want to make sure it's you. I want to have that Windows Hello or that thumbprint or biometric from your laptop. So really, you need to be scalable, you need to have versatility, but you really need the context of the devices and the context of the actual user behavior in order to make decisions about that multi-factor. And then you need to be able to use these different tiers or levels of authentication. And with Okta, we're providing that with all of our customers, and our deployments, back that time to value conversation, are clicks away from enabling all of these types of multi-factor authentications with very little install, because our infrastructure is in the cloud and it's already certified for those compliances like we talked about before. And with all this, we integrate very well with those partners, BeyondTrust and with Varonis, as far as providing access to those different systems.
Perfect. And sorry, I don't mean to cut you off there. It's obviously an important piece there. We have a few questions. I want to make sure that we get to our questions, and obviously we want to make sure we give away the rest of the prizes. So real quickly, some of the questions that came in, we'll keep this real short. So BeyondTrust. So Chris, we're in the process of purchasing a PAM solution. Where do we start? So let's go 20 seconds or less for your answer.
Man,
rapid fire.
I wish you could answer that in 20 seconds. Ultimately, it all depends on what the driving force is. Is it an audit? Is it compliance? What is it? If none of those tackle it, then the next decision is, do you want to go after the low-hanging fruit, or do you want to go after the crown jewels and get those protected? Ultimately, it's up to the customer. There really is no, starting point or ending point. The idea behind it is continuing to move forward and continuing to mature your overall PAM stance.
Got it. Perfect. Looks like a question for Stephen. So Stephen, the question is, what type of information does Varonis gather in Office 365?
The 20-second answer would be, we're going to identify where all the data is. We're going to look inside and see where all the sensitive content is. So, credit card numbers, social security numbers, that type of information. And then we're also going to look at all the activity and tell you exactly who's touching what files, who's sharing with what. And yeah, that's about it. Was that 20 seconds?
It was pretty close, not too bad. And then let's see, we have one last question. Can I use Okta's adaptive MFA to protect access to the data that Varonis is identifying? So Michael, I think I'll let you answer that one, because I think this was a key point we were trying to drive home.
Absolutely. So yeah, because of Okta's adaptive MFA being integrated with our APIs on the back end and with our integrations with all our different tools in our Okta integration network, you can literally apply Okta's multi-factor authentication to desktops, to your BeyondTrust, your PAM solution. You can put it into the Varonis tools that you're actually using to identify this. And then once you've identified through Varonis all of the vulnerabilities and the security policies you want to enable from what you've discovered through their discovery and set up all those security modules, you can use our lifecycle management to provision those group memberships and remove those group memberships, not only putting the adaptive multi-factor in front of their authentication through either a desktop or through the dashboard itself when you're going to Office 365 or any of those cloud-based applications, but also you can manage the lifecycle of those users through automation and get the access control.
Perfect. Perfect. Great. I know we have a few other questions. I'm actually going to make sure that we get those answered to the individuals offline so that we can go ahead and do the final raffles. So I will ask Miss Annie if she will draw the next winner so I can announce those. All right, so for our third winner, it is, looks like maybe an abbreviation, but Y Bryant. So congratulations, Y. I'm not sure if that's first name or just an initial. Next winner is Dave Shattuck. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Dave, congratulations. Fifth winner, I recognize this name, Sean Eccles. Congratulations, Sean. And then for our last winner, we have Philip Varner. So again, thanks everybody for joining, for entering in. Congratulations to all the winners. What you can expect as some follow-ups, what I'll tell you is that your Alchemy reps will definitely be reaching out to you. We want to make sure that you have all the information you need to collect your prize. We want to make sure that any follow-up information you need from today's webinar is available to you. And then we're also going to make sure that we get out to you those certificates of attendance for your CPE credits for those of you that need to get those logged in. So again, congratulations to everyone. Thank you all for joining. Sorry we went, looks like a minute and a half or so over, but thank you all for the time and staying with us for the entire time. Congratulations to our winners, and I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.